I'm Jonathan Tales, and this is a presentation about how microclimate drives the plant community composition on post-disturbance landscapes. In this photo, we can see the landscape after a clear cut, and in the center of the photo you see a retention patch. This retention patch is meant to help emulate the spatial patterns of wildfire, which typically include unburnt patches of forest called fire skips. And these fire skips are thought to serve important functions, one of which is to provide a refuge for interior forest species by keeping a cool microclimate relative to the disturbance. So here are the questions I'm looking to answer in our study. Do forest remnants moderate microclimate? Are microclimates of forest remnants similar to larger tracts of forest? How do plant communities respond to microclimatic variation? And does the disturbance type change the answer to any of these questions? So in these photos, on the left you see a retention patch, and on the right you see a wildfire skip. You can see some differences in structure there, especially with respect to the amount of snags and dead wood. And so are these differences enough to drive differences in microclimate or plant community? To answer these questions, we located a number of harvest sites and a number of wildfires in the upper foothills region of Alberta that are approximately 10 years post-disturbance. We established 90-meter transects across those remnants and the adjacent disturbance, and we also established transects in a nearby undisturbed forest, which we called our reference forest. And so this will allow us to make comparisons between the remnant type, that is harvest versus fire remnants, and compare remnants to their reference forests. We collected data on forest structure and established microclimate sensors at these sites throughout the growing season. We also collected vegetation community data to the species level. So here's a PCA exploring the relationship between forest structure and microclimate. The black vectors are the microclimate variables, and you can see that they are strongly oriented along the component 1 axis. Also strongly oriented on that axis, we see variables like canopy closure, edge distance, moss cover, spruce basal area, and the amount of litter. And so basically what this is showing is that cooler temperatures are found in forests with more structure, more canopy closure. So to investigate this further, I plotted the temperatures against the basically the transect. So on the left of this x-axis, you can see that, or that's basically the inside of the disturbance, and as you move to the right along that x-axis, you enter the forest remnant. The two colors are the two disturbance types. You can see that for both disturbance types, temperatures decrease as you move from the disturbance into the remnant. And this was also supported by a mixed linear model, the results of which are shown in the table below. But we did not observe any difference between the two disturbance types. When I compared the remnants versus the reference forest, you can again see that the temperatures decrease as we move into the forest. And here we did see a interaction between edge distance and forest type. So what this is showing is that island edges essentially had slightly higher temperatures compared to reference edges. Then I wanted to look at how plant communities respond to microclimate. So on the left, you can see ordination of basically a cluster analysis where you can see that our three clusters are strongly correlated with temperature vectors: soil minimum temperature, soil maximum temperature, and air maximum temperature. And then this is also supported by the results of this permanova, which is shown in the table on the right. We can see the air maximum temperature, soil minimum temperature, and soil maximum temperature are the most important factors in this permanova influencing plant community composition. We also saw some significant effects of edge distance and other forest structure variables like spruce basal area, deadwood volume, and pine basal area on our veg composition, and some other variables like disturbance type was close to significant, as well as organic layer and canopy closure. Here's a quick look at our three clusters. Cluster 1 is essentially representing our edge environments. It's sort of a mixture of clusters 2 and 3. Cluster 2 is associated with forest interiors. It has a high amount of moss, low amounts of litter, and a bunch of ericaceous shrubs like Labrador tea and different types of blueberries. Cluster 3 is associated with disturbances. It has a high amount of litter, a low amount of moss, ericaceous shrubs again, but it also has higher quantities of things like hairy wild rye and fireweed, which are typically associated with post-disturbance landscape. In conclusion, microclimates and forest remnants are significantly cooler relative to the adjacent disturbance and are comparable to larger forest tracts. Retention patches also had similar microclimates to wildfire skips. We saw that microclimates significantly influenced the distribution of plant species on the post-disturbance landscape. These results support the notion that forest remnants can act as refugia for interior forest species.